Rain pattered softly against the foggy windows of the antique shop as I browsed the dusty shelves and glass cases. The musty smell of old wood, mothballs, and aging paper permeated the stale air. It was the kind of quaint local shop you'd expect to find in a small town like Elderton. My eyes scanned the array of curios, glass bottles, tarnished silverware, creepy porcelain dolls with cracked faces, until my gaze settled on a wooden display of antique jewelry. One necklace in particular caught my attention, a simple black cord threaded through a weathered brown leather cat collar with a tarnished silver buckle. I chuckled to myself. A cat collar in an antique shop? Elderton locals and their superstitions. I picked it up to examine it more closely. The collar felt heavier than expected, and turning it over in my hands, I noticed an inscription on the inside. Beware the cry in the night, or misfortune shall ignite. You've got quite the eye for the peculiar, I see. I turned to see the shopkeeper, an elderly man with wispy white hair, regarding me from behind the counter. What can you tell me about this collar? I asked. The shopkeeper's affable demeanor shifted, his eyes darkening. I'd strongly advise against purchasing that particular item, son. Some things are better left undisturbed. I quirked an eyebrow. Why's that? The shopkeeper lowered his voice to a grave whisper. Legend has it that collar is cursed. They say it belonged to a witch's cat back in the 1800s. She placed a curse on it before she was burned at the stake. Anyone who hears the cry of a cat while wearing that collar will be visited by great misfortune. I couldn't help but laugh. A cursed cat collar? You really expect me to believe that? The shopkeeper frowned. Whether you believe it or not is up to you. But heed my warning, that collar brings nothing but trouble to whoever possesses it. I placed the collar back on the display. While I appreciate the concern, I don't put much stock in superstitious nonsense. As I turned to leave, the shopkeeper called out, "Don't say I didn't warn you, son." I waved dismissively as I stepped back out into the chilly autumn air. Elderton had no shortage of eccentric locals ready to spin a yarn about haunted artifacts and magical curses. Having grown up here, I'd heard it all before. Some folks here clung to folklore and urban legends like relics of the past. But me? I considered myself a realist. Cursed cat collar indeed. What foolishness. Still, something about the collar intrigued me. Its intricately carved silver buckle, the aged leather, the inscription itself, the storyteller in me felt inspired. As a writer, I collected strange artifacts and antiques. This could provide some creative inspiration for my horror short stories. My skepticism aside, the collar did possess an allure I couldn't quite shake. After a moment's hesitation, I returned to the shop. "I've changed my mind," I announced. "I'd like to purchase that collar after all." The shopkeeper's eyes widened in dismay. "Son, I urge you to reconsider." I silenced him with a raise of my hand. "I don't scare so easily." "How much?" With a resigned sigh, he named his price. I paid in cash and tucked the collar carefully into my bag. As I turned to leave, the shopkeeper called out once more. "Mark my words. That collar brings nothing but misfortune." I chuckled and stepped back out into the gray afternoon drizzle. Curses weren't real. I simply needed a macabre creative artifact for inspiration. What could go wrong? The unsettling cries begin. That evening, an unsettling stillness permeated Elderton. The only sounds were the pattering rain, the rustling branches, and a faint roll of thunder in the distance. I sat in my study examining the cat collar beneath the warm glow of my desk lamp. The polished silver buckle glinted as I turned it over, admiring the aged leather and intricate designs. I jotted down notes and sketches, imagining the creative possibilities. A supernatural tale of pet cemeteries and animal possession? An ode to Egyptian cat worship? Ideas swirled through my mind. This collar would make fine creative fodder, superstitions be damned. As I brainstormed, a sudden yowl outside my window made me jump. The stray cats often fought over territory, but something about this cry felt different, melancholy, and unnatural. I peered out the rain-streaked glass into the hazy darkness but saw nothing. Just then, the desk lamp flickered. I glanced up as the power surged, then cut out entirely, casting the study into darkness. A loud crash rang out from the kitchen down the hall, followed by the tinkle of shattered glass. Unease prickled my skin. Power outages during storms were common here, but the timing felt odd. I fished my flashlight from the drawer and made my way to the kitchen. Broken glass and porcelain littered the floor, a drinking glass and plate smashed to pieces though nothing had fallen. I swept up the jagged shards, pulse quickening. The power still hadn't returned, so I lit some candles and made tea, hoping to calm my nerves. The leaping shadows and flickering flames only amplified the uncanny atmosphere. As I sat sipping chamomile, another shriek split the night. Closer this time. I peered out the back door but only glimpsed shifting shadows. A few houses nearby had their lights on, also running on generators. At least the outage wasn't isolated to my place. Still, that desperate cry lingered in my mind. I thought of the inscription on the collar tucked away in my study drawer. Beware the cry in the night. I shook my head, scattering the thought. Ridiculous. I refused to succumb to flights of fancy. The desk lamp's wiring was faulty, the glass simply unbalanced. The cries were stray cats yowling over territory. Nothing sinister stirred in the shadows. I turned my mind firmly back to outlining my story. I would show Elderton's superstitious residents. Their folklore had no power over me. Research and revelation. Over the next few days, however, the disquieting events continued. My tires mysteriously went flat twice. My mailbox was smashed by some phantom vandal. Food rotted rapidly in my fridge during more power outages. All explainable on their own perhaps, but together they painted an unsettling picture. The cries persisted too, drifting through the night at odd hours. Sometimes a single drawn-out wail, other times a chorus of howls and shrieks that raised the hairs on my arms. I rarely glimpsed the source, just fleeting shadows and reddish eyes reflecting in my flashlight beam before vanishing into darkness. By the third sleepless night, flickering candle by my bed, I could no longer justify it as imagination or coincidence. Some malevolent force seemed determined to chip away at my skepticism. But I needed concrete facts before I could accept anything supernatural. The next morning, I paid a visit to Evelyn Harper, Elderton's local historian. If answers existed, she would have them. Evelyn's cozy cottage overflowed with leather-bound books and antique oddities. As I explained the strange events over tea, her wise features reflected deep concern. "You say you purchased a cat collar from Mr. Humphrey's shop?" she asked. When I nodded, her frown deepened. "May I see it?" I presented the collar. Evelyn's eyes widened upon seeing the inscription. "Just as I feared," she murmured. She opened a weathered tome, flipping through aged pages before jabbing a finger at an ominous woodcut illustration. Legend states that collar belonged to a witch's cat in 1816. She placed a curse on it before being burned at the stake by townsfolk. I stared at the image, a raven-haired woman tied to a flaming pyre, black cat curled around her feet, villagers gathered with torches. "Circle of fire," the caption read. I recalled the shopkeeper's words, a chill creeping down my spine. "The witch swore revenge against the town," Evelyn continued. "The curse causes anyone who hears the phantom cries of her cat to suffer escalating misfortunes." She fixed me with a grave stare. "You must break the curse before this escalates further." I gazed at the collar. If I wanted to stop this, what would I need to do? Legend says only the one who activated the curse can end it through a ritual appeal to the witch's spirit. She withdrew a leather-bound journal from her shelf and pressed it into my hands. An account of the curse has survived in my ancestor's journal. He was present at the burning. This may help guide you. I clutched the aged book, possibilities churning in my mind. Evelyn squeezed my shoulder. "Be careful, Alex. Some forces are beyond our control." I thanked her and departed, journal tucked securely under my arm. No more hiding from this. One way or another, I had to face this head-on. The cat's vengeance unleashed. Armed with Evelyn's ancestor's account, I prepared to perform the ritual that night. I gathered candles, herbs, crystals, anything that might appease or summon the witch's spirit. Just past midnight, beneath the glow of the full moon, I lit the candles in a circle and placed the collar at its center. As I began to chant the incantations, a fierce wind arose, extinguishing the candles. The collar began to glow, rising into the air as an unearthly shriek pierced the silence. Shadows gathered, forming a writhing mass that surrounded me. Red eyes blazed from the darkness as yowls and caterwauls assaulted my ears. Realizing my mistake, I attempted to banish the presence, but chaos erupted. Lights surged and shattered, furniture shook, objects flew across the room. The shrieking cat chorus swelled to an unbearable cacophony. Amidst the pandemonium, I begged for it to stop, but the presence only intensified. Finally, I managed to grab the collar and flee outside. Only once I had placed distance between myself and the house did the shrieking and shaking subside. I collapsed in the yard, gasping for breath. Clearly my ritual had failed. If anything, I had amplified the curse, unleashing something beyond my control. I gazed around with dawning horror. Lights flickered across town, sounds of destruction echoing through the night. The presence I had summoned was no longer confined to my home. I had brought doom upon all of Elderton. The distant shrieking resumed, no longer human or animal, an otherworldly chorus swirling toward me. I squeezed my eyes shut, clutching the collar as the wailing cacophony surrounded me once more. When I opened my eyes sometime later, I found myself on my knees in the middle of Main Street. Dark clouds boiled overhead in unnatural patterns, the air electric with sinister energy. Shop windows were smashed, debris scattered across the fractured asphalt. No other souls stirred, no lights in windows, no passing cars. Just my ragged breaths and the rolling thunder. I staggered down the street, dazed. The spirit I had unleashed was now tormenting the entire town. If I didn't act quickly, there would be no stopping its vengeance. But my naive ritual had only made things worse. I gazed at the collar in my hands, fury rising in my chest, fury at the curse, at my arrogance, at forces beyond my comprehension. With a tormented cry, I hurled the collar away from me with all my might. It fluttered end over end before disappearing into the darkness. Let the damned thing bring misfortune elsewhere, far from Elderton. I wanted no part of it. As I turned to seek shelter from the storm, a cat's sepulchral wail echoed from the shadows. Then another, closer this time. One by one, spectral cries surrounded me once again. I dropped to my knees, clamping my hands over my ears until the shrieking faded. When I dared open my eyes again, the accursed collar lay before me, glinting mockingly in a flash of lightning. I screamed my fury and anguish at the churning sky. There was no escaping this. The curse was sealed, and I was trapped within its sinister loop without hope of escape. Descent into darkness. In the days that followed, a murky gloom cloaked Elderton in perpetual twilight. Thunder rumbled endlessly, strange streaks of green and purple lightning spiderwebbing the sky. Wreckage from the havoc littered the streets, but no attempts at cleanup or repair could be made. No human soul emerged from their refuge. I alone still roamed the streets, clinging to the hope that I could undo the chaos I had brought down upon us. I pored through library archives, dug through Evelyn's stacks of documents, consulted with psychic mediums, anything for clues on how to lift this curse for good. But Evelyn remained sealed up in her cottage, lights drawn. The mediums refused to assist, sensing the malevolence that now gripped the town. And every path of inquiry led me back to dead ends or ominous warnings. All the while the spectral cries persisted, wavering and swirling through the empty streets and alleys, emanating from every shadowy corner I passed. They rose and fell like a mocking taunt, reminding me that my desperation was futile against the forces I had awakened. In the gray stillness of a junkyard on the town's outskirts, I confronted the futility of it all. Surrounded by rusted car skeletons and shattered glass, I sank to my knees amidst the refuse and wept bitterly. The collar lay before me, the cat's sepulchral chorus echoing from its core like a heartbeat. I raised my tear-streaked face to the roiling sky. "Just leave this place," I shrieked, throat raw. "Haunt me if you must, but spare Elderton." My voice cracked. I could not win against this entity. Her soul was too stained with rage, her power too terrible in strength. I could only beg for mercy. "Please," I rasped. "No more." For a moment, the shrieking paused, leaving only howling wind and rolling thunder. Then a shockwave blasted out from the collar, hurling me backward. The last thing I recalled was my head striking metal before the darkness rushed in. Trapped in the nightmarish loop. Silence greeted me when I regained hazy consciousness. No wind, no thunder, no phantom cries. I gazed up at a gray static sky, unchanging. No debris surrounded me, the junkyard was pristine. In fact, the streets beyond seemed free of damage too. Unease stirred in my gut. I rose and wandered the streets, the empty windows and abandoned vehicles like ghosts from another time. The only sound was the scuff of my own footsteps. No signs of life disturbed the stillness. The sidewalk stretched on endlessly no matter how far I walked. Buildings blurred together into a seamless facade. Nothing altered, the silence absolute. Time itself felt suspended. With growing dread, I recognized my new nightmare. The witch's spirit had answered my plea for mercy, trapping me in eternal stasis. No way forward or back, just an infinite loop frozen in shadow. I sank to my knees as the futility crushed down on me. I was a fool to think I could overcome forces beyond my control. Now I would remain here, alone and tormented. As if summoned by my thoughts, a faint cry pierced the stillness, so distant it might have been an echo. As I raised my eyes, more wails arose in a dissonant chorus. The cursed cries coalesced until they surrounded me, undulating with malicious delight at my imprisonment. I clenched my fists and screamed my rage and anguish, but the cries merely swelled louder, drowning me in a cacophony of the damned. And so it continued for what felt like eons, my voice long since grown hoarse and feeble. The damned collar lay before me, merciless binding of my eternal fate. In time, my spirit would also fade, leaving behind only a cursed relic, a warning unheeded. The cries kept on, piercing the stillness that had become my forever. I surrendered at last, collapsing upon the frozen sidewalk as the cat's mocking chorus sang on. Eldredon's shadowy purgatory. My own personal hell. The haunting legacy of my fatal skepticism. The endless chorus. They say if you find yourself on the outskirts of Eldredon late at night, you can still hear a faint, unearthly chorus drifting through the darkness, the last tormented vestiges of a damned soul trapped between worlds. No living soul remains in that bleak town where time stands still, its buildings and streets now crumbling monuments. Yet even in decay, the town serves as a grim reminder of forces beyond mortal reckoning and the allure of mysterious relics. Should you feel compelled to enter in search of answers, heed the warnings well. Some doors cannot be closed once opened, and curses, like stories, endure long after their makers have perished. The damned remain, dwelling in the shadows between belief and folklore, reason and imagination. Their voices echo on, reverberating through the decades, whispering warnings unheeded by those for whom skepticism eclipses faith in the unseen. Let Eldredon stand as a cautionary tale against blindly courting folly through denial of that which we cannot explain. For true horror dwells not in the shadows of superstition, but in the unbridled darkness within us all. There are more things in this world and beyond than ever we shall understand or wish to. So take care not to disturb the cries echoing through the derelict streets and abandoned alleyways. Let the dead keep their secrets, the shadows their sorrow. Listen and heed the warnings that linger. Believe in the unbelievable and surrender your skepticism to forces beyond the veil, lest you too join the endless chorus of the damned, trapped by the dangerous allure of curses and the scarred souls who wield their wicked power against.